My girlfriend said she'd marry me if I became her sister first. For as long as I could remember, I had been living the life expected of me. A stable job in IT, a cozy little apartment, and a wonderful girlfriend who, by all accounts, should have made me feel complete. Sophie was everything I could have hoped for: smart, confident, and effortlessly beautiful. She was the kind of woman who drew people in with her radiant energy, the kind of person who knew exactly who she was. I envied that about her. I wasn't unhappy, not exactly. My life was comfortable, predictable. But there was always this nagging feeling, an itch just beneath the surface of my skin that no amount of success or love could scratch. I didn't know how to put it into words, and I certainly never talked about it. Even with Sophie, the person I trusted most, I kept certain thoughts locked away. At night, when she was asleep beside me, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind filled with questions I was too afraid to answer. Was this really the life I wanted? Or was it just the life I thought I was supposed to live? Sophie and I had been together for 3 years, and last week she proposed to me. It should have been the happiest moment of my life. And yet, the ring sat untouched in its velvet box on my nightstand, taunting me. I loved Sophie. I knew that much. But something about the proposal, about the idea of committing to this version of myself forever, sent a ripple of fear through me. I caught myself staring at Sophie's clothes more often than I cared to admit. The way her dresses swayed with her movements, the effortless elegance of her makeup, the way she carried herself with confidence that I could never seem to muster. Once, when she was away for the weekend, I had stood in front of our bedroom mirror, holding one of her dresses against me, just to see. Just to imagine. My heart had pounded, so hard I thought it might burst. I never put it on. I couldn't. I shoved those thoughts aside, burying them under layers of logic and excuses. It was nothing. A passing curiosity. A silly fantasy. But Sophie saw through me. She always did. That evening, as we sat curled up on the couch, she studied me in that way she did when she was about to say something serious. "You're overthinking again," she murmured, running her fingers over the back of my hand. I forced a chuckle. "Isn't that what I always do?" She smiled, but there was something knowing in her eyes. "James, are you happy?" I opened my mouth, ready to say yes. To lie. But for some reason, the words caught in my throat. That was the moment I knew something had to change. Sophie must have sensed my hesitation because she didn't let it go. A few nights later, as we sat across from each other at dinner, she put down her fork, folded her hands, and looked me dead in the eyes. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." I swallowed, my chest tightening. "Okay." She hesitated for a moment, as if carefully choosing her words. "When I proposed, you didn't look happy." I flinched. "That's not true." James." Her voice was soft but firm. "I know you. I know when you're forcing a smile." My stomach churned. I felt like a deer caught in headlights. "It's not that I don't love you," I said quickly. "I do. I don't know." Sophie leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "I think you do know. You're just scared to say it." I clenched my fists in my lap. She was peeling away layers I had spent years, carefully wrapping around myself. Then, she said something that knocked the air from my lungs. "James, have you ever thought about being someone else?" I froze. A sharp jolt of panic shot through me. She couldn't mean what I thought she meant. Could she? "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Sophie tilted her head slightly, studying me. "I mean, have you ever wondered what it would be like to live differently? To be different?" Blood roared in my ears. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. Then, she reached across the table and took my hand. "I love you," she said, "but I think there's a part of you you're too afraid to explore. And if that's the case, I don't want to marry you, not yet." I jerked my head up, my heart hammering. "What?" She exhaled slowly. "I'll marry you, James. But only if you take the time to really figure out who you are." I stared at her, stunned. Then she smiled, her eyes full of something both mischievous and deeply understanding. "I want you to become my sister first." I couldn't sleep that night. Sophie's words looped through my mind like a haunting melody. "I'll marry you, but only if you become my sister first." What did that even mean? Was she joking? Testing me? Or did she see something in me that I had been too scared to acknowledge. For days, I wrestled with it. Every time I thought about bringing it up, my throat tightened. I told myself it was ridiculous. I was a man. Sophie loved me, not some version of me she had imagined. And yet, that itch beneath my skin, the one I had spent years ignoring, had flared to life. One evening, as I sat on the edge of our bed, running my fingers over the fabric of one of Sophie's dresses, I heard her voice behind me. "You're thinking about it, aren't you?" I dropped the dress as if it had burned me. I wasn't. She walked over and sat beside me. "James, it's okay." She placed a gentle hand on my knee. "You don't have to pretend with me." Shame curled in my stomach. "I don't even know what I'm supposed to do," I admitted. Sophie smiled. "That's why I'm here. We can figure it out together." The next evening, she handed me a shopping bag. I peered inside and felt my breath hitch. A wig, shoulder-length brown hair, eerily similar to Sophie's. A simple summer dress. A makeup kit. I can't," I stammered, my hands trembling. "You don't have to," she said. "But I think you want to." My pulse pounded as I stared at the items in my lap. I wanted to deny it, to shove the bag away. But deep down, I knew she was right. Tentatively, I stood and stepped into the bathroom. My hands shook as I slipped out of my clothes and pulled the dress over my body. The fabric was light, soft against my skin. I turned to the mirror, my heart hammering. I still looked like myself, just a man in a dress. I sighed, ready to rip it off, when Sophie knocked. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then nodded. She stepped inside, her gaze sweeping over me. She didn't laugh. She didn't mock. She simply smiled. "You look beautiful." I scoffed. "I look ridiculous." She shook her head. "You look like you, a version of you that you've never let yourself see." I swallowed thickly. "I don't know what I'm doing." "That's okay," she said. "Let's take it slow." The next few days felt surreal. Sophie guided me through small steps, applying a bit of mascara here, showing me how to walk in flats there. At first, I felt awkward, exposed. But as the days passed, something shifted. One night, I stood before the mirror again, this time with the wig in place, a touch of lip gloss on my lips, and a soft blouse hugging my frame. Sophie stood behind me, resting her chin on my shoulder. "What do you see?" she whispered. I stared at the reflection. For the first time, I wasn't sure. "I don't know," I admitted. She smiled, pressing a kiss to my cheek. "That's okay. You're figuring it out." And for the first time in my life, I wanted to. The first time I saw her, really saw her, I almost didn't recognize myself. It was late, and Sophie had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from another evening of coaching me through makeup. I sat in front of the vanity, my reflection staring back at me. The soft glow of the lamp bathed my skin in warmth, highlighting the delicate arch of my brows, the gentle flush of my cheeks, the glossy tint of my lips. For weeks, I had been chipping away at my fears, taking hesitant steps into this new identity. Every time I dressed up, I told myself it was just an experiment, a game, a challenge to see how well I could pull off a disguise. But tonight felt different. Tonight, I didn't feel like a man playing dress-up. I felt like her. I traced a fingertip along my jawline, tilting my head. The wig, a chestnut brown with soft waves, cascaded down my shoulders. My lips parted slightly, as if testing the weight of my own breath. Then, without thinking, I spoke. "My name is Lily." The words sent a shiver down my spine. I hadn't planned to say them. They had just come, as if they had been waiting inside me all along. The weight in my chest lightened. A strange, giddy rush filled my veins. I tried again. "My name is Lily." A smile broke across my face, one that wasn't forced, wasn't hesitant. It was mine. A rustling sound came from the couch. I turned to see Sophie stirring, her eyes fluttering open. "Hey," she mumbled sleepily, sitting up. Then her gaze landed on me, and her breath caught. I felt suddenly exposed, but this time I didn't shrink away. Sophie blinked at me, then slowly, a radiant smile spread across her face. "Lily," she said softly, as if testing the name on her tongue. Something inside me clicked into place. I nodded. "Yeah, Lily." Sophie stood, crossing the room. She reached out, cupping my cheek with gentle fingers. "I knew you'd find her," she whispered. Tears burned at the edges of my eyes, but I didn't wipe them away. For the first time in my life, I wasn't hiding. For the first time, I was me. I took a deep breath, my fingers trembling slightly as they brushed against the satin of my dress. The city lights flickered through the restaurant window, casting golden reflections across the tablecloth. Sophie sat across from me, her warm smile reassuring, but my heart still pounded in my chest. This was it. My first time in public as Lily. My first time stepping into the world as myself. The waiter approached, and I braced myself, expecting a second glance, a hesitation, something that would shatter the fragile confidence I had built. But he simply smiled and asked, "What can I get you ladies this evening?" The words hit me like a shockwave. He saw me as a woman, not as a man in a dress, not as a joke, as Lily. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat threatening to break into a sob. Sophie reached under the table, squeezing my hand. "Lily," she prompted softly. I forced myself to breathe. "I'll have the pasta primavera," I said, my voice light steady. The waiter nodded and jotted it down without a second thought before turning to Sophie. That was it. No questioning looks, no awkward pauses. I felt like I had been holding my breath for weeks, months, maybe my whole life. But in that moment, I exhaled. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. Sophie and I laughed, talked, clinked our wine glasses together. And for the first time, I wasn't performing. I wasn't second-guessing every movement, every word. I was living. But the real test came when we left the restaurant. As we stepped outside, a group of men stood near the entrance, talking and laughing loudly. My stomach twisted. I knew this moment, the fear of being read, of hearing snickers or cruel words thrown my way. I felt Sophie squeeze my hand tighter, as if she knew what I was thinking. I straightened my shoulders, took a deep breath, and walked forward. One of the men glanced up as we passed. For a brief second, I braced myself, expecting something, anything, that would shatter this fragile illusion. But he just gave me a quick, polite nod before turning back to his conversation. That was it. No whispers, no mocking laughs. I turned to Sophie, my eyes wide with disbelief. "Did you see that?" I whispered. She grinned. "Yeah, babe. You're just a beautiful woman out for dinner." That's all they saw. A warm, overwhelming joy flooded through me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't pretending to be someone else. For the first time, I was seen and I was Lily. Life didn't change overnight, but I did. In the weeks that followed, I embraced my new reality with a kind of quiet confidence I never thought possible. The hesitation I once felt, the fear of judgment, the uncertainty of my place in the world, had started to fade. I was Lily now, and every step I took in her shoes felt more natural, more right. Sophie had been my anchor through it all. She helped me update my wardrobe piece by piece, encouraged me through the awkward moments, and reminded me, every single day, that I was enough, that I was beautiful. "I knew you had this in you," she said one morning, watching me apply my makeup with the ease of someone who had done it 100 times before. "But I love seeing you believe it too." I smiled at her reflection in the mirror, warmth blooming in my chest. "I do believe it." And for the first time, I truly meant it. Work was surprisingly uneventful. I had worried about what my coworkers would say, whether I would be treated differently. But in the end, people adjusted. Some were curious, others supportive, and a few simply didn't care. My biggest fear, that I would lose myself in their eyes, never came true. Instead, I gained something better, the chance to be me without apology. The best part? Sophie still looked at me the way she always had, maybe even with more love, more pride. One evening, as we sat on the couch, her legs draped over mine, she turned to me with a teasing smile. "So, are you ready to be my sister yet?" I laughed, shaking my head. "I think I'm past that, don't you?" She leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to my lips. "Yeah, I think you're exactly where you're meant to be." And she was right. I wasn't Sophie's sister. I was her girlfriend. I was Lily. And for the first time in my life, I was truly, completely happy. Life has a way of leading us down unexpected paths, ones that challenge us, force us to confront our fears, and ultimately reveal who we truly are. At the start of my journey, I never imagined that embracing Lily would mean finding the kind of happiness I had only dreamed of. But self-discovery isn't about fitting into someone else's expectations. It's about daring to ask yourself who you are and having the courage to embrace the answer. There will always be doubts, fears, and obstacles. But the moment you stop fighting yourself and start accepting who you are, the world opens up in ways you never thought possible. I found love, confidence, and a sense of belonging, not because I changed into someone else, but because I finally became myself. And that, I realized, was the most beautiful transformation of all.